City of Johannesburg says William Nicol Drive will soon be renamed after Winnie Madikizela-Mandela. The city announced the renaming process will start soon and will involve public participation as well as further engagements with the Mandela family. A motion for the renaming was passed by council over a year ago. Madikizela-Mandela was actively involved in politics from an early age. She fiercely opposed apartheid and became a target of the security police. She was also known as the mother of the nation. The struggle stalwart would have turned 84 years old today. Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, of course, would have turned 84 today. She died at a hospital in Johannesburg in 2018. As South Africans commemorate her birthday, we'll look back at her life through the personal stories of people who knew her closely. Among them was ANC-NEC member Lindiwe Sisulu, who joins us live now to share some of those memories. Good evening and thank you so much for your time tonight. Let's just begin with, she would have turned 84 today, certainly a day that some have marked even on social media, saying that, she remains fearless. Her legacy lives on. What are some of the personal reflections for you today as you remember Winnie?
Well, many of them. But I do know that she was a passionate gender activist, and she asserted her right as a woman to be treated equally as any man. That was some of the foundation politics that she passed on. And she was very unapologetic about her strident, politics. At a time when, conformity was really required of everybody. She did find herself in conflict with some of the mainstream political requirements from the ANC, and she stood her ground. And now, when I reflect on those times, I realize that it was possibly because of, no, not possibly, I know it is definitely the people that she surrounded herself with, the people that believed in her, the people that were there with her all the time, and that is the youth. And the youth are known for their the urgency with which they respond to anything, sometimes without thinking. And I think that some of the things that the youth around her did gave the special branch the opportunity to, get to her in a way that was really very, the irony, they just completely removed her rights. I'm in the Free State just now. I had gone to Brantford, and I was hoping that the house there would have been completed, but it hasn't. But when you see the place, you know that this should not have happened to anybody. But it did happen to Winnie, and she survived it. She was a survivor, strong-willed person, very much, very much her own person, and she was very clear about her own rights and about her own views, and she expressed them. And I think that we have lost somebody who would have stood up specifically for women, and made sure that women's rights are part and parcel of everything that we do. And when I talk about women's rights, I'm not talking about them in the broadest intellectual, angle. I'm talking about them at the, when women are at their weakest, when women are subjected to the kind of violence that they're subjected to. She certainly would have been a voice out there, and a voice to be heard, a voice to be reckoned with. And we're experiencing violence of an unprecedented nature in this country. And I am certain she would have led a movement to make sure that women are, young women are protected, especially. I reflected on her and the choices that she made in her life, which were sometimes too radical for her period, but she didn't mind being radical. She was radical. I could go on about her. And she presented to society an activist of a different kind than that which we perhaps had experienced or known, but she was just Winnie. She was just Winnie, and her contribution is just unique, lasting, impactful, and it reverberates throughout, most of women in Africa and in the diaspora, and will live on long after her memory has faded.
And certainly quite an invaluable contribution, as many today are reflecting on her life. But I want to touch on something that you spoke about as well, which is that house in Brandfort. And it's a project that has been going on for quite some time now, for a number of years, over a decade. And certainly when one marks the 84th birthday, really it's a bittersweet moment that that house is still not a museum that is available to the public to know more about her life. And it has been mired in controversy of corruption over the years.
Well, I'm not aware of the corruption part, but I am just as distressed as everybody else that it has taken so long for that house to be turned into a museum. It's necessary just for people to understand the conditions under which, the apartheid regime dealt with women. And you can go through all the women who were in the struggle. They were dealt the bitterest blows. But I can talk about Winnie because there is some distance between myself and herself. I couldn't talk about, say, Albertina or Aunt Ruth or Ruth Mompati or any. But this is just the way that the apartheid, got to women in ways that were so uniquely grisly. To take a mother of a family and remove her from where she is, remove her from her community, and come and dump her in the kind of place that we have now, and it is still the same. The unfortunate thing, as you say, is it is still the same. Nothing has changed for that community. And if we'd gone ahead as government and done what we had promised to do, turn that into a museum where people can go and see how she lived, learn about her and her politics, that place would have had some kind of economic revival, if revival is the necessary word. But it's still an old township left very much like a apartheid township. But I had discussions with the leadership of the Northwest, and they tell me that next year, for certain, it has been many next years, but this time they have promised that by next year, the house will certainly be opened up as a museum. I'm not sure what stalled the project. I'm not sure that it was corruption. I wouldn't comment on that one.
Okay, because in the past, when there were investigations that were done, it certainly looked like monies had exchanged hands, but still, as you say, each year it's still not done. But let's move on to something else. When you look at her life, certainly while many others are celebrating her, she was someone that had a target on her back, and some are even saying that she was vilified, and really her history then, as some would say, was not really acknowledged in the way that it needed to be while she was still alive. Do you get a sense that, as you said, that she was a radical politician, a radical activist? Do you think she was misunderstood?
I think she was misunderstood, but at the same time, I think that she defined her own space. She didn't allow other people to define her space. And what made her stand out in that way is that, when you operate underground, as most of the structures were operating at that particular time, there's a certain conformity that is required, a certain way of doing things. And she would have none of that. She would be as strident as her heart told her to be strident. And that is, I think, a uniqueness in her, that she was fearless. She was not a conformist. She was just herself, and herself a very angry woman, looking around her and seeing the poverty. But there's another side of her that is very rarely told, and that is the compassion with which she, lived with her community. There wouldn't be a funeral in that area without Winnie popping in, bringing some groceries, attending a funeral, going to see the sick, because at heart she was a social worker. So she continued the social work, and with a political angle to it, and it really worked for her. She really, by the time she died, the people around her home had really lost an extremely unique individual.
And do you think she's been honored enough? I mean, today we're hearing the city of Johannesburg talking about a process starting to rename William Nicol Drive. There were also calls after she passed on to rename an airport after her. Do you think enough has been done to preserve her legacy and honor her?
Well, she died about a year ago. Now, normally the ANC would honor people after their death. It just is the way that they do things, and it makes it so much easier. So she lived. She lived a good 80-something years. It would only be after her death that they would have wanted then to see how they honor her. And I am glad that the city of Johannesburg has finally decided to name the William Nicol Road as Winnie Mandela. It will certainly be a pleasure for most people to drive down Winnie Mandela Avenue as opposed to somebody they didn't know, have no relationship with. I think it's one of many. I think with time, as people understand and digest our history, they will be able to honor her in the way that perhaps you yourself are indicating she needs to be honored. But this is something that the ANC is not particularly good at. It takes time for them to do the honoring. We live with people who contributed enormously, and it's only when they die that we, sit up and think, oh my God, we should have done something like that. But I think we learn with every passing of individuals who played major roles in our struggle. And hopefully going forward, we will have better response to that. We might even want to have a heritage desk in the ANC that will monitor and make sure that we remember people appropriately. It's the only thing we can do after they've gone. When you consider what they have given of their lives to give us the democracy that we have, we owe them much more than naming roads or remembering them on their birthdays.
And as a final question from me tonight, how would you like South Africans to remember her?
Well, I suppose, it would not be dependent on me to determine how South Africans remember her. But I took the opportunity, having been asked to come and talk about her on her birthday, to remove a few myths that surrounded her that I thought were a little exaggerated. And some in her favor, some that were not in her favor. And I thought, having spent time with her, I spent a great deal of time in the last 2 years of her life. I'd known her all my life, but it's only in the last 2 years of my life that I actually got to know and understand her. And I thought, okay, I'll use this opportunity to get to tell South Africans, what I did get to know of her, and to remove some of the myths that were there. I do think, though, that most of those myths were driven largely by the intelligence services of the apartheid state to, besmirch her character in one way or the other. But it didn't help that she had the youngsters that she had around her home. And youngsters, as you know, are very radical. They'll do the first thing that comes to their mind. But she was drawn to young people because she shared a certain radical nature with them. And she worked with them a great deal. Some of them have matured now. But I think that to a very great extent, they drew the negative attention she got and the negative commentary she had was because of the people that surrounded her at that particular time.